tolerate the feelings that I feel when I feel. Don't you know, some feelings never seem to let go. Like a silver blade, I cut my way out of control. But don't you know, some blades will cut you right to the bone. And if somebody's going to make it, then this somebody ought to be you. And if somebody's going to fake it, then this somebody is you. If it's me that was going to take it, then I know that it wouldn't be straight. And I keep telling my reflection, ambitions are already starting to fade. And if somebody's going to make it, then this somebody ought to be you. And I keep telling my reflection, ambitions are already starting to fade. goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Cameron, and I am still a friend of Darren's. He called me last February and told me what was going on with his life and asked me if I would preside over today, and I'm honored to do that. I'm taking some medications that make me very dry, so if I suddenly stop talking, or if I get too lispy or whatever, just cope with it. In this life, names are very important to us. Our names become who we are, and they become the way we are addressed and the way that we are remembered. Our names are lovingly given to us by our parents, and although they may be shortened or become a nickname, and I don't believe Darren had a nickname. Did he? No? Didn't think so. So what others call us becomes the beacon that is our life in memory. And it's now time to speak of Darren. Some people come into our lives for the long term. Some people come into our lives for the short term. But regardless of the duration, we know them. We share, we grow, and we learn. They may bring us an experience of peace or make us laugh. They may teach us to do something we never thought we could do. They leave us an unbelievable amount of joy. Lifetime relationships, excuse me, I warned you, didn't I? Lifetime relationships teach us lifetime lessons. Our job is to accept the lessons, love the person, and put what we have learned into all other relationships and areas of our lives. Certainly that was true of Darren. When any one of us dies to this life, whether we are mourned or not, we drop like a pebble into the ocean of eternity, and a ripple is created which forever widens to an unknown shore. This is a little poem by a friend of mine, James Broughton, who is an American poet. It's called Gurgles. It seems to fit right now. Do not ask where we go from here. Nobody knows. Nobody really knows anything about anything. We're all just gurgles in the stream, and the stream does not know where it is going either. It is just going. It is just going along with its nature, wherever that may take it. And with its nature, it takes along a whole host of gurgles who are ever asking where they're gurgling to. Everything is going beautifully nowhere. We're gathered here today to say farewell and to remember Darren. He is not with you as he was just a few short weeks ago, but he's very much alive in your hearts and in your memories, and that makes him very much alive. Darren will always be with you because of that indestructible thing that makes each of us individual, made him unique, a one-of-a-kind man who lived for life, for his beloved family and friends, for the good times and all the important things, and yes, that certain something that made up that special person you love will live as long as you care in your memories. Rather than me going on at length, I would like to introduce Dana. That's you.
That's me.
Would you come up, please?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. Darren asked me to do a Bible reading today, so him and I sat down, we went through a few and chose Ecclesiastes 3. For everything, there is a season. I need my glasses. A time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Thank you.
And I'm told that it would be easier for our next guest to simply come up and introduce herself. Sam?
Is it on? It's on. Thank you for that. I'm Sam, and Darren and I first met in the summer of 2022 at Pride. And I'm pretty sure I was prancing around in my underwear with no shirt on. So he got the good view there. But we saw each other again at our mutual friend Rob's graduation in this room during what ironically was then also a snowmageddon. It was a very empty room because no one could get anywhere. So it's nice to see this room filled up for Darren. After that evening, I had a couple drinks and was again prancing around, and I'm pretty sure was singing a Christmas song very loudly. And he said this touched him, so he reached out to me shortly after and said, "Do you mind? I'm planning, what's going on in the next year. Do you mind singing at my celebration of life?" And that is not a request you can say no to by any means. And he had a specific song, "Who Knows Where the Time Goes." And he messaged me and said he was hoping to have a live performance of this because he first saw it at the Ballet BC performance in the spring and was desperately searching for some sort of version of it that he could play and just couldn't find it. And so I'm his perfect pseudo companion for that. I actually had the opportunity to sit with him in his house with a few friends, and he hosted us with dinner at Cosmos and got to sing this performance for him. So this is his second time hearing this. So Darren, if you're listening, I hope this makes you joyful and that everyone feels your smile while this is happening. It's time for them to go before the winter fire. I will still be dreaming. I do not count the time. Sad, deserted shore. Your fickle friends are leaving. But then it's time for them to go.
count the time. For who knows where the time goes? Who knows where the time goes? Thank you.
Lovely, Sam, thank you. Now I get a chance to introduce the older sister of Darren. She said she may be older, but she's not wiser. Would you come up, please? Share some family memories. Oh, and as a special bonus, we get Mark.
Okay, is this okay? Everybody can hear me? All right. Anyway, my name's Marie, and I'd like to thank everyone for being here today, either in person or online. And our family is forever grateful for the love and support people provided for Darren, not only over the last couple of years since his diagnosis, but over his entire life. I'd like you to take just a moment to think of a favorite memory of a time that you shared with Darren. I realize that there are likely many of those memories, but these are just a few that came to mind when I sat down to write this piece. To all of you who worked with him at the various acronyms related to BC Healthcare, worked in his garden, provided puss-puss care, made a meal or dessert for him, cleaned his condo, organized his pantry, filled his freezer, juiced puss-puss, made sense of that second bedroom, partied with him at pride events or on so many other occasions, traveled with him to so many amazing destinations, attended dance performances, curled with him, attended quarterly school trip or games night events, attended school, planned community events, drank and or shared tea with him, enjoyed lunches or dinners at Second Beach, new Michelin rated or old favorite restaurants. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. You gave him such love and brought him so much joy over his entire life. And that gift of friendship became more evident to us over the last 2.5 years. I will get this together. Okay, additionally, the recent months living in Vancouver provided us with the unique opportunity of getting to better know many of you. The energy, love, laughter, and tears that you shared with Darren during these last months, including 24/7 care and at St. John's Hospice, will be treasured memories forever. The ongoing contact through texts, phone calls, and invitations for get-togethers has continued to provide comfort and when we have needed it most. I'd also like to thank Spectrum Health, BC Care, and Vancouver Coastal, who provided ongoing medical care and support. Thank you also to Three Bridges and ABC Home Support for the professional, kind, and caring service given to Darren during his last weeks at home. And we are also grateful to St. John's Hospice for the albeit short-term, but kind and compassionate end-of-life care. This gratitude refers to and includes answering our many questions with patience, sharing moments of humor, and doing your best to ensure that Darren's needs were met. Darren is my little brother, and I have, and I'll always love him. But he also played so many other roles in my life. He was my protector. When as kids, I was scared of the boogeyman, and he had my back throughout my adult life, provided sound wisdom, always sound wisdom, and constructive feedback when needed. At the same time, all of that being said, over the years, we did have a spat or two, which I'm sure many of you may have witnessed, and so we apologize for that. Some very recent ones too. Historically, he was the little brother who allowed me to dress him up in the dresses I could no longer fit in. As a young child, he created amazing Lego structures that, for those of you who don't know, would be entered in worldwide Lego magazine contests. He was the academic sibling who had a language base far beyond his years. For example, who uses the word jovial when you're 13 years old? Darren did. And this language ability was even more evident with his regular and recent use of Latin for his daily medication. Darren was intelligent, forward-thinking, accepting, thoughtful, and generous. And what I wanted to share today, thankfully Mark is going to help me with this, were some of the qualities and skills that over the years Darren taught our family and possibly many of you. Thank you, Mark, for taking it from here.
Good afternoon. Before I move on to Laurie's comments, some brief introductory comments from me. I like to think that there was some element of destiny or fate leading to my friendship with Darren. Soon after my move to Vancouver over 26 years ago, I became aware of the bright star that was Darren while out and about in the Vancouver social scene. Our orbits finally connected when Darren and his beaming smile arrived at my front door in his black Jetta to give me a ride to a weekend getaway with mutual friends. Our initial conversation set the stage for what was to follow. "Where did you grow up?" I asked. "Oh, you've never heard of it," he replied. "Try me," I answered. He said, "I grew up in a small town in western Manitoba, Inglis." I replied, "Heard of it? My dad was the United Church minister in the late 80s. And I grew up in the equally small town of Saltcoats just down the road." He laughed. "I got my first speeding ticket just outside of Saltcoats." And yes, I do believe that although it took some time, it was a matter of destiny that two boys, both born in 1965, who grew up some 90 kilometers apart on the prairies, would ultimately form an incredible friendship 34 years later in Vancouver. After that initial meeting and the many years to follow, Darren's unconditional and inclusive friendship has been a North Star for my husband Scott and me. Darren so generously shared his love of life, family and friends, the prairies, good food and wine, travel, and most importantly, laughter. At some point in our time together, whether through many shared meals, movie nights, weekend getaways, international travels, curling adventures, or volunteer work with the Fillmore Family Foundation and the McLaren Housing Society, the lines between friendship and family became oh so wonderfully blurred. It is in that spirit of connectivity between friendship and family that I'm honored to give voice today to Laurie's words of love and celebration for her brother. Have purpose, be productive, and set an intention. These attributes were installed by our parents, and Darren took them to heart. Childhood tasks include weeding the willows before camping trips, picking raspberries, loading bales, hauling grain, and doing dishes, unless one of us could find an excuse to get out of that task. These tasks ensured that we knew that when there was a job to be done, you just did it. He excelled at school and university and found the time to have a very good time, making lifelong friends along the way. In his first year of university, balancing his course load and maybe a little partying, he committed to working the night shift with Fred, a man living with MS. Duties as assigned also included lighting Fred's joints, long before medical marijuana was a thing. Darren recently told me that this experience was one of the things that sent him in the direction of public health management. The sense of purpose continued throughout his adult life and the work he chose to do in Victoria and Vancouver within the public healthcare sector. He would always try and explain the projects that he was involved in, but I will leave the details of that to be shared by people who actually know what he was talking about. Although he may not have always known what we may not have always known what he was referring to, his enthusiasm for the work he was doing and the respect he had for so many of his colleagues was evident. Darren also believed very strongly in the importance of volunteering in the hopes of working towards healthier communities. His time spent with McLaren Housing, planning the annual Prairie Fairies Fall Supper events, and involvement with Planned Parenthood brought him satisfaction, a sense of purpose, and so much joy. And I know he appreciated the ongoing contact he had with his co-volunteers. Part of Darren's purpose in life was also to educate the less than competent drivers and pedestrians of the world. From spending any time with him, I'm sure you know that turn signals are to be used, walk lights are to be followed, and you better know where you're going, or you will have heard a corrective horn honking and an expletive or two thrown out the window. I truly believe that Darren created good times and experiences with friends and family for him to enjoy in the moment, but that also created connections between friends and family that would endure when he was no longer with us. Purpose and intention completed. Be kind and generous. Darren always took his responsibility as a son very seriously, and that was never more apparent than when our mom was living in her last few months. The care and compassion he provided for Mom, as well as the strength he brought to that experience, was a testament to the kind of son he was. Loving, accepting of reality, responsive, and life-affirming. He brought those same qualities to his relationship with Dad, with regular trips to Inglis, the farm, and Winnipeg, welcoming Dad for time in Vancouver, and weekly phone conversations. His commitment to being a godparent to Jeff and having a strong relationship with A, B, and C, also known as Anna, Beck, and Kate, was always evident. His love and respect for the entire extended Kopetsky and Scott families was obvious, as it was important to him even when he wasn't feeling super healthy to attend family gatherings and events in Manitoba. His generosity was evident whenever he visited Manitoba, always arriving with Been Around the World coffee, Marine Blend, a local favorite. Christmas and birthday cards and gifts were always thoughtfully chosen for all of us. Surprise flowers would be delivered, and one day, a Tushy toilet arrived, as supposedly everyone needs one. Jeff and Aaron received theirs after November 17th. A bidet from beyond was Jeff's tagline. Be independent and adventurous. Darren was the ultimate travel planner. He introduced Bill and me to Tofino many years ago, making it one of our favorite places on earth. When we came to visit Darren, there was always a full slate of activities to be enjoyed. Darren loved traveling, joining many of you on adventures over the years. One of his first long-distance trips occurred in his early 20s when he traveled to Argentina as part of a Rotary program, and then on to so many places around the world, coming full circle to his final overseas to Spain, where he caught up with the members of the Argentinian family he had stayed with so many years ago. Appreciate, live, and experience life fully. Over the years, this quality would come through in his love of spending time with friends. He loved the experience and taste of fine food, and we and others got to share some amazing meals with him here in Vancouver and in Winnipeg at restaurants that he wanted to try. Many meals were also shared at his home or in his backyard garden in Lanai, with the table being set with the Estonian linen and his very special serving utensils. He loved the color and vibrancy of fresh-cut flowers, which were a constant in his home. He also looked for beauty in the culture of dance and theater, treasured memories for many of us who had the opportunity to join him at these events. Connecting with friends was always an important Darren's life, and over the last 2 years, this became a much valued part of his daily routine. I would get notice of the many enjoyable conversations he had via phone, Facebook, FaceTime or Zoom with friends or family in the Netherlands, Vietnam, London, Madrid, Seattle, and closer to home, Prince George, Chase, and throughout Canada. His motto after coming home from Christmas 2022 in Winnipeg when he was feeling so awful became, "I've got stuff to do." And he got stuff done, from planning and hosting his 58th birthday celebration last January, attending our aunt and uncle's birthday party in Victoria, hosting friends and family from out of town, to putting together Monju, his second anniversary bash. He loved spending he loved bringing together his friends and family for laughter, good food, and at least once, very expensive tequila shots. Many of us were lucky enough to attend and enjoy these festivities that were always filled with such positive love and energy because of the people he had in his life. This enjoyment and living of life also included capturing the beauty around him. Photographs taken over the years of his many travel adventures, along with photos of the cherished people in his life, were a source of comfort after his diagnosis and provided lots of conversation starters. Photos taken with the tripod sitting on rocks, stumps, and ledges. Photos of sunrises during his False Creek walks, prairie sunsets, and as well on his adventure to search out the northern lights when he was home in March. Photos of Puss Puss, Miss Lady Beans, as well as friends, cats, dogs, and turtles were part of the picture files as well. As the ultimate party planner, this event today was one he was very much involved in. He referred to it as a celebration of life and the people that made it great, and had lots of thoughts about what he wanted included in today. He wanted people to have fun, celebrate, reminisce, and leave feeling upbeat, positive, and experiencing a sense of connection. David Batas, a human rights lawyer, said these words about the loss of his younger brother earlier this year. He has permitted me to use them regarding Darren. The disappearance of Darren is to all of us who knew him a big loss. But the reason for that is to have known him was a big gain. I like to think that he has not really disappeared, but just changed location. Before, he was outside us. Now, he is inside us. Externally, he is now at rest. Inside us, he remains alive and awake. Within us, he is welded to our hearts, our minds, and our souls. Darren's presence in our lives brought immeasurable joy, love, and laughter. And for that, I'm hoping we can all be forever grateful. Thank you.
Where's Auntie Barb? Would you come up here? This is Auntie Barb. Mickalin? You can, yeah, bring anyone you like. And this is Jeff.
Hey, everybody.
Good afternoon. You really enjoyed Samantha's music, and I'd like to thank her for that. But she mentioned the cosmos, and now I have a real yearning for a cosmos. Anyway, good afternoon. The Kopetsky and Scott families have had the ultimate good fortune to claim Darren as one of our own, and we gravely share this heartbreaking loss with you, his friends and colleagues, but most of all with Harold, Marie and Bill, and Puss Puss. Simply being proud of this man is not enough. Darren grew up on the Lazy Bar Cave farm in Inglis, Manitoba, where his grandparents had settled, and his dad, Harold, had grown up with 6 older sisters, 5 of whom took to Canadian and American family city life, and his oldest sister remained nearby farming in the Inglis area. Darren's mom's family, our family, was 5 additional aunts and uncles, and we were around rural Manitoba. So in total, we are quite a large family. For all of us, the Lazy Bar Cave was a most welcoming place. I was 10 years of age when my sister Lorene married Harold, and part of every summer vacation to follow included time with the Kopetsky family. Eventually, Lorene and Darren arrived on the scene as playmates for Cousin Dorothy, the Hanson cousins, Cousin Dana, and myself. We spent many hours playing in that farmyard and sometimes actually helping out. We were always ready for an end-of-the-day picnic at Mississippi Beach. So not only did Darren eventually turn what he learned from these regular family beach excursions into a paying job as a lifeguard for some summer college money, but also Darren was true to himself and his family names as he adopted grassroots values. curiosity, a strong work ethic, a love of music, a well-rounded sense of humor, and a sense of purpose that strived to make the world a better place. This was his approach to life, all while having some fun along the way. His connection to all of us in his extended family and every sense of the words community and accountability have served Darren well in his life purpose. What is actually quite relevant to his overall success, however, is that Darren's exploits in science evolved beyond seeing what effect there would be from boiling rocks, that his taste in music encompassed more than the cousins' Meatloaf, Bat Outta Hell airband days, that his talent in the kitchen eclipsed helping Larry shape, regular-sized buns while forgetting they were going to rise and become footballs, and taking a role in his cousin's olive-eating contests, which the record is 22 in a minute, so I'm told. And most important for him in the Vancouver scene here is that Darren's taste in wine graduated well beyond his dad's $9.99 wine staple. And if you grew up in the prairies on no $9.99 wine, maybe a loony and a toonie could have bought you a bottle. Darren's genius at taking charge and problem solving may have first been witnessed when a community surprise party had been organized for his parents' August anniversary. After dinner that evening, Dad was growing impatient to get the family organized and on their way to grab a camping spot for a camping fishing weekend celebration instead. After Larry, Darren, the cousins tried a number of things to interfere with Harold's preparations, Darren, unnoticed by anyone, went out to the yard hydro pole and pulled the main breaker, which confused and stalled his dad just long enough for the endless stream of friends and neighbors' cars to come up the lane. If you read the news about Darren from November 17th, 2023, and you're watching today and you knew Darren from English Community Days or were in Major Pratt Collegiate in Russell, Manitoba alongside Darren, you might remember him as a polite, good-looking guy, cared about everyone, great smile, a citizenship award winner, academic achiever, involved in drama productions, the yearbook, had a passion for photography. Well, throughout his adult years, Darren just kept adding dimensions to his life that made everything better for everyone close to him. Larry asked me a few years ago if I had ever Googled her little brother. I had not, but I did. Darren was making an authentic difference in people's lives and not just participating in something that makes a person look authentic. Darren embraced the faith in which he was raised by giving time and energy to causes that were important to him. And I know from many conversations with Darren that what he accomplished was always with a humility that would be best summed up by, let me stand where no man stands alone.
For our family, the reaction and reflections over the past 2 months have meant finally having to acknowledge this heart-wrenching loss and to take the time to reflect on Darren's impact beyond being a son, a brother, a nephew, our cousin, and for all of us, our friend. He always enjoyed being a host and doing it up with class. He totally embraced sharing Vancouver, the Vancouver he loved, with everyone who came to town. He never missed the opportunity to record events with his, "Wait, let's take a photo." And hundreds of those photos were constantly scrolling on his screen for Darren and his visitors to enjoy. His photo collection became especially comforting when it became more difficult for him to get out and about from his home. When family members were communicating their thoughts with my mom, the first words shared pretty much summed up our loss: heartbreaking And frig, life is unfair. Across Canada and from coast to coast and from Vietnam, heartbreak has been expressed in a number of different ways in different communications. I am now going to share a few of those messages with you. He broadened our view of the world, and we definitely look up to him and admire him and his legacy. A reminder was shared for us to remember the many fun times at the Kopetsky farm with Harold, Lorene, Laurie, and Darren. As time goes by, we must remember all the special moments. Darren was surrounded by so much love. To be sure, he felt it too. The only thing that we can ever wonder is if we've made an impression on this world while we were here, and he sure did. He battled to the end, and to see that he took advantage of every day gives a person inspiration to not waste a moment being unhappy. Grief was also shared among family and friends as messages came in to say, we're toasting Darren tonight in a fancy way because Darren, as you can see, likes fancy. Darren more than measured up. He set the bar to a super high level. He was an inspiration on how he lived and how strong he was. I am so glad to have been able to tell him how much I love him, and I've enjoyed becoming a part of his Vancouver family. Darren could speak his truth with clarity, adding a touch of sense of humor or that special Darren smile. One of the cousins was with Darren this past summer when a medical professional told Darren, you lived well and you're choosing to die well. To which Darren responded, always the overachiever. Oh man. And the cousins reflected as well that Darren was truly a remarkable person who had the ability to connect with us all, leaving us with a precious memory. One of the messages of how we all feel was delivered directly to Darren himself in early November. Our octogenarian uncle and aunt summed up our admiration in this way. We are so proud of the courageous battle you fought against this dreadful cancer. You did it with humor, dignity, and a kick-ass attitude. You were truly a remarkable human being, and we will always love you. To be true to who you are and the family name that you bear is a big ask, but Darren accomplished that and much more. As you know, yes, Darren in his life was bonded with a number of communities, including his unwavering love of family, people who love a good party, colleagues, pride goers, fellow cat lovers, turtle lovers, and animal lovers in general, causes he supported, and his lifelong friends. But more than anything, over the past 2 years, the community of friends who rallied around Darren during his cancer journey gave all of us and his family some peace. And as a family, we would like you to know, as the inevitable unfolded this past October and November, the very special support Darren's closest friends gave him was beyond meaningful. And the beauty of this has been discussed at length by all of us who love Darren. You are indeed the brightest stars in his stellar constellation. To Darren, forever and always in our hearts.
Thank you both. I would now like to bring up another person that I haven't met yet to talk about Darren's career, and that's Camille Charianiello.
Ooh, nicely done.
I know it's a hard C. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you
Cheers.
so much.
I am incredibly grateful for Darren to have given me this opportunity to share with you some of my perceptions of his work life in Vancouver. At the same time, it's an occasion that I wish didn't exist. Let me preface my comments by saying that I'm going to acknowledge that some of what I share with you today is not actually my independent knowledge There are a group of colleagues, Carol Storos, I don't know that Carol's here, had asked a group of colleagues from the work that Darren did in Vancouver to contribute to a nomination for an alumni award at the University of Alberta in 2022. So we came together to write letters on behalf of Darren. Penny Washington, Garrett Clements, Doug Cochran, Anne-Marie Taylor, Patrick O'Connor, others all participated in that. And so I'm going to use some of what we put together to just describe some of his work to you today. Now, Darren himself described what he did as 30 years spent working to prevent patient harm or dissatisfaction, working to mitigate harm when it was identified, engaging in fair and timely remediation of any claim or complaint related to that harm, and then catalyzing quality improvement opportunities from each of those situations. He touched every aspect of work that has been important to me over the years. So I believe we met many years ago at a fowl supper. Funny how those kind of things can actually create connections. But formally, we started working together in 2004. He was in his role as Regional Director of Risk Management and other things for Vancouver Coastal, and I came in to take a risk management job at Providence Healthcare. And from day one, I have looked to Darren for his guidance and expertise and practical application of how the fuck do we make things happen. And I wonder whether that is why he actually invited me, of his many colleagues, to speak today. Because we have had a really great symbiotic relationship. Darren's polish, his perfection, and my kind of vulgar approach. And I think it worked quite nicely together. We didn't always agree, but by God, we always respected each other so totally. And it's disappointing to me to say that in these last 2.5 years, he learned that his work-informed view of the patient experience, the view that he tried to project and implement throughout our healthcare system, was not the universal experience of patients, and I'll come back to that. So I said he touched on everything that was important to me: adult guardianship, informed consent, substitute decision makers, advance directives, and for those who care, please don't put the D on advance. It is not advanced directives, and I'm happy to hear some of you laugh because you know how important that was to him. But I'm going to speak specifically about 3 particular pieces of work that I think Darren is just so highly regarded for. The first is Section 51. Again, chuckles. This is an exasperating piece of legislation that we have in British Columbia. It's a singular section of what is known as the Evidence Act, and it was created to ensure the confidentiality of information or documents that are created for the purposes of quality improvement, so quality of care reviews in healthcare. And the intent is that you're creating a safe space where people who are involved in care can come together and talk about what went well, what didn't, but know that they weren't exposing themselves unnecessarily to a legal issue. It's really important. Without it, people just are going to cover up things that they may actually know are happening, and we won't make the changes that we need to make. So in the early 1990s, Darren's working as a policy analyst for the BC Health Association, and the government is going to undertake a consultation process for the development and implementation of our initial Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. I refer it to as FOIPA for the remainder of this presentation. So his role was to work with hospitals and healthcare organizations, learn and advocate for their perspective. And what he heard was concern that the generally desirable broad access provisions of FOIPA that would allow people to get access to documents that maybe had something to do with them would actually potentially put a damper on the enthusiasm of which healthcare providers would come together to do quality of care reviews. So he was trying to straddle these two perspectives. And despite being relatively new in his career, he was able, I understand, to really effectively articulate those concerns to leaders in healthcare and legal advisors at the Health Association, such that the ministry actually determined that that issue needed to be directly explored. They needed to look at the relative benefit of those privilege aspects of Section 51 versus the broad access provisions of FOIPA. He was inevitably prepared at every meeting with a full understanding not only of the intent of the legislation, but the practical implications. And that's the piece that sometimes is really hard to tease out. He was integral to the consultation process and in particular argued that including a notwithstanding clause in the Evidence Act would not negatively impact the rights of patients generally, or even those involved in legal action. And of course, the outcome of that review confirmed Darren's perspective. The notwithstanding clause in Section 51 was actually for the benefit of the greater good of all. To ensure that in healthcare we continue to use every opportunity for learning within an incredibly complex environment about how we can make care safer. Now that all happened before Darren and I met. And then I get to meet him, and I had been working in a different arena prior to our meeting, and I may have come to my work with a particular lens on Section 51. But what I heard from him was that despite his advocacy for the sanctity of Section 51, he was also adamant that there had to be appropriate parameters in place to ensure that it wasn't being exploited, that we weren't simply putting a blanket over bad things that may have happened so that patients and families wouldn't learn or wouldn't understand what had happened to them. Within his own organization, this is now when he's at Vancouver Coastal, he ensured that people understood there was no magical bestowing of Section 51. You couldn't just waltz into a room and say, I now pronounce we're doing a Section 51 review, thinking that that meant no information was going to go beyond the walls. It had to follow a process. And if new things were learned during that review, those facts were still going to be shared to patients and their families, because that was information they were entitled to have. So he embraced, at a very early stage in all of our working lives together, this burgeoning patient safety culture that recognized the need to consider the best interests of the patient while also providing a safe place for providers to learn. Now, his clear understanding was not necessarily the norm throughout the province. Section 51 was being uniquely interpreted, local interpretation, urban myth, misframed personal experiences, dare I say bad legal advice. So in 2019, he again took the charge to lead a dialogue with risk representatives from all of the health authorities, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Finance through the Healthcare Protection Program, to build consensus on a uniform application of the law. And his voice has been heard because there's actually now work undergoing at the ministry to maybe reframe Section 51 altogether to better balance the needs of patients with the needs of the healthcare system. So the work isn't done. Darren, you left too early, but we're closer than we've ever been. The next area I want to talk about is medical assistance in dying, or MAID as it's colloquially known in BC, and the role that Darren played as this was being introduced to British Columbia. So before any other health authority even started turning their mind to this, Darren and Patrick, who's here today, who was their Vice President of Medicine at Vancouver Coastal, came together to map out what was going to be the approach for that healthcare system when patients were reaching out and seeking assistance for medical assistance in dying. They anticipated, rightly so, that there would be a wide diversity in comfort and agreement with healthcare staff who would be impacted specifically by this changing law. And so they created a working group that was intended to provide opportunity for the sharing and recognition of all perspectives, pro-MAID, anti-MAID, in order to inform their approach. And in his usual progressive style, Darren included members of the public, because how could we talk about this without them being one of our partners? So he ensured that the patient voice would have a place at that table. And Darren, of course, invited me and my colleagues from Providence Healthcare to be part of that group. We shan't get into the politics today, but of course, Providence being a faith-based organization, we knew we would not be offering medical assistance in dying in any of our facilities. But there was no experience to draw on. It's hard to think back to how foreign all of this was to us at the time, because it's rolled out actually so well over the last few years, but there was no existing model or practice for us to adopt or adapt. But Darren recognized the clear need for partnership between Vancouver Coastal and Providence Healthcare, because the patients that we served were going to need some place to actually receive what could well be the last stage of the healthcare that they were receiving. And so I just want to say, with few exceptions, there are others, but Darren has been the person at Vancouver Coastal who maintained the most respectful partnership with his colleagues at Providence. He was able to straddle that line of striving for the highest quality of care with respect for the fundamentals of faith-based healthcare that we were operating under. And clearly not all of his colleagues possess that talent. So under Darren's leadership, that working group drafted a policy statement that was going to be made available widely. Again, those that know Darren from a work-related side know there's not a policy out there that Darren doesn't love and embrace. And if a 2-page policy is good, a 10-page policy is going to be amazing. But he ensured within this document, both for Vancouver Coastal and Providence, we would be compliant with the law, but we would be respectful of the perspectives and the opinions of the people who were doing the work. And of course, it was endorsed by the VCH board and then borrowed and adopted broadly across the province, because he and Patrick had gotten so ahead of the game on that. And then his proactive efforts were recognized by others, and he was asked to work collaboratively with the Ministry of Health, the BC Coroner's Service, the professional regulatory boards for physicians, nurses, NPs, pharmacists, to develop uniform documentation standards that would aid both patients making a request, but also the providers, support physicians and nurses who were doing the provision of the medical assistance in dying. And then back locally, he established and made care coordination service within Vancouver Coastal, and it had a lens of learning, because as I say, we didn't have anything to adopt at the time. We didn't know that journey we were going on. So right at the start, as cases began, he was bringing together people to have a discussion and talk about what could have gone better, what went great. So we wouldn't always fixate on the wrong, but what went great, what could we do better, what do we need to change in this process? So again, with input from patients, when possible, families, staff, so that we could really flesh out what would be the best experience of all. He brought his expertise in policy analysis, interpretation, education, his patience in community building, and his management of a wide variety of perspectives to the work. And he brought his sensitivity as well. He moved Vancouver Coastal, and in partnership Providence, forward through this really massive social change in an incredibly compelling way. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the Patient Safety Learning System, or PSLS. This may sound dry to some of you, but not to those of us who were doing it. And he was a force. So, BC was the first the first province in Canada to have a province-wide electronic system that was implemented to support the reporting, management, analysis, and dissemination of learnings related to patient safety events, which are, those things that happen in healthcare that you think, what the fuck? So the work originally started in 2003, and it was his vision. So he came to this risk management committee that was a provincial group of health authority risk managers, representatives from Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance. Oh, might I digress to say, Providence was not a member of that group at the time. Decisions were made that Providence didn't deserve a seat at the table, despite the fact that some of the most important conversations were happening there. So he tirelessly advocated for Providence to be able to join that group. And in the interim, he kept me up to date as best as he could on the conversations that were happening there. And sometimes bringing the unique Providence perspective to that committee as well. And after they tired of his relentless lobbying, I was invited to join finally. So we were actually able to be there arm in arm for many of these conversations. So back to the main topic. All of us in risk were very frustrated by the ridiculous paper-based incident reporting system that was currently in place. It was almost like, pieces of paper wafting like confetti around the health authority, where, one document turned into 6 pieces of paper that never came back in any way that allowed us to ensure that changes were being made, an analysis could be done to see if there were trends or if there were really compelling issues that needed to be addressed. So he was the one who pitched the idea of this web-based reporting system that would be accessible by anyone who touched patient care, not just a nurse or a doctor, but a housekeeper if they saw something that made them think, oh, that doesn't look good. So and then he also thought, then we can come to our leaders and say, here's how you handle these things. Here's how you take a system lens, and instead of, as we had maybe historically done, try to figure out who should we point the finger at and blame for this problem, figure out what could we do at a systems level to actually improve the way that the work happens. So again, his awareness of the patient safety culture lens in very early days is quite remarkable. So they moved forward, and over the next 5 years, that risk group, they explored the concept, they collaborated on scoping and seeking financial support for the proposal, which was significant. They sourced vendors to create the tool, and ultimately they did create this system that's known as BCPSLS. And he was core. Anne-Marie, if you're watching, I apologize. It almost surprised me that PHSA became the foundational health organization to support the work, because I saw this as being driven by Darren and his vision. But we have this amazing system in place now. Darren, Anne-Marie promises that the web-based version is coming this year. Again, through the work, Darren showed his phenomenal skills in listening and communicating to ensure that everyone was heard. Long before there was this movement to have the patient's voice, Darren was constantly advocating that the patient voice needed to be there, that their concerns would be incorporated in our plans, as would the concerns of all of the different people who may actually have some interchange with these types of systems. He really understood that interorganizational safety management system lens. So, to all the healthcare people in this room, I have barely touched on what Darren brought to our system. I see you nod, Sibylla. By the very nature of our affection and regard for Darren, we're not the ones likely who need to be the audience to hear this, but we are the ones who can continue to press his message. Providers and teams need to listen and hear what the patient is saying. They know their symptoms. They know the impact. They know what is happening to them. They need to rely on us to understand and apply the science. I have rewatched the video that Darren recorded, I guess last year, maybe a year and a half ago, for health talks at the Health Quality Forum. I've watched it several times. And he kept coming back to one message, and this was directed to all of his partners, patients, families, clinicians. We need the grace to demonstrate that we can work together in this complex environment. His words to that collective were, chances are that everyone is having a bad day. We are in this together. So what better words for me to end with? Chances are everyone here today is having a pretty bad day. But because of our communal respect and love for everything Darren stands for, we're in this together.
Thank you, Camille. Pardon me, need to clear my throat. Monty Rutan. A social friend of Darren's for years, and may I say, a connoisseur of parties and wine.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? I see some nods. You might not be able to see at the back, though, that I'm putting rubber bands on my wrist, and this is in reference to an old movie, I think it's Sordid Lives, where a woman was trying to quit smoking, and if she got stressed, she would snap the rubber band on her arm, and I know that this is going to be hard for me, and I'm going to get emotional, so this is my small brain reaction. Second is water. I'm deeply honored to speak today as a representative of all of Darren's friends. I'm slow to make friends. That contrasts starkly to Darren, who presented in front of me a masterclass example of how to keep and make friends. As I reflected and gathered anecdotes from others for today, it occurred to me that by and large, Darren's friendships did not end. He swept you in with his charm and wit. If you thought you were worth the trouble, chances are you were a friend for life. So, Darren was all about his friends. And I feel it an important opportunity for me to try to honor his friendships. I am going to mention some people by name. Many I heard Darren mention over the decades, so I know that they are his people. If I don't mention you, that is all on me. It is no measure of your importance to Darren. Your connection to Darren might have some similarity to what I speak about. So I offer a representative example, not an exhaustive list. As I approach the microphone, maybe you could sense it in the people that know me, a slight degree of apprehension. They're wondering, what embarrassing tale will I tell? I'm not known for my discretion. There was one anecdote about something Darren said to me once about reincarnation, and what a perfect tale for a celebration of life. But it's a little bit risque. I told Darren I had in mind to tell that today. He laughed. A couple of weeks later, he said, "You know that tale?" Well, maybe you could read the room before you tell it. And oh, there's the cameras. I think it's being streamed, and so I can't read that room. So I'm going to leave it, but come find me later if you want to hear the reincarnation story. So sadly now Darren's taken my best material. I'm sorry to say there won't be any embarrassing stories, and the people that know me can relax. I've been lucky and privileged to have Darren Kopetsky as my dear friend for 30 years. My partner David and I met Darren in the summer of 1993. We were at a house party. None of us knew the host. By chance, we ended up sitting side by side on the couch. We started chatting. The host was a bit manic, so we're kind of watching with apprehension as to what's unfolding. And so it began. We chatted with Darren, and it was our great luck to know him from that point on. He invited us from that party to a yard party the next week at the big house he lived in on Douglas Crescent. He, with roommates, shared the top floor of that big house. One of the roommates, Colin McCrae, tall Colin, he's here today. Another roommate was Tim Roy. Those are friends from Victoria days. In the last years, Darren would get together regularly with Colin. Other friends from the Victoria era, Brent Benoit, Jeff Smith, Brent. Dana McKenzie, or Dana Larson. That's the Dana that read the beautiful scripture to us. She met Darren more than 50 years ago when he was a happy-go-lucky 4-year-old. Their parents were friends, and Dana, I understand, would spend summers staying with extended family in England. Dana was there for his teenage lifeguard years when he sported perm hair. Over the years, Dana and Darren shared family fun at beach parties, drive-in movies. Dana eventually became Dana and Drew, that I heard mentioned frequently over the years. They lived in New Westminster with their kids. Dana tells me about a time in 2014 when she spent many weeks in Vancouver General Hospital being treated for cancer. Darren, no surprise, would visit her hospital room twice a day, often with homemade meals for her kids. At the time, Darren worked at that hospital in patient quality care. As his visits carried on, some of the nurses were getting nervous as to why the patient quality care guy was coming by so often. I'm guessing Dana got good treatment during that period, and the nurses were relieved that Darren was visiting as a friend and not in his professional capacity. In my personal view, I could see that Dana was such a good friend when she and Drew even stored the famous purple chair for a bit after it had left Darren's apartment. Dana's anecdote of Darren at work in the hospital reminded me of another story that Darren told me. When Darren was in the hospital for the last time as a patient, last October, he was receiving blood transfusions as his body was no longer producing hemoglobin or platelets. He told me later that the doctor, who came to get his written consent to receive the transfusion, was using the form incorrectly and using the wrong part of the form. A form that Darren had created 20 years earlier. When Darren told the doctor he was using the form incorrectly, the doctor became a bit discombobulated and tried to put up a bit of resistance to Darren's advice. Darren told him that he created the form, and he knew so because it still had the same typos in it that it had when Darren created it. So you might be surprised to learn that Darren carried the day, and the other part of the form was properly completed. I knew the story wasn't finished at that point. I knew it was coming. The end of the story was, that doctor was young and hot. Another dear friend is Jackie. Jackie's here with her family, her 3 kids. You heard about ABC already. Jackie was sister to one of his roommates at university days. They became dear and lifelong friends. Darren loved to visit their busy place near Regina, or when any combination of Jackie's family came to visit. We've heard mention of Carol Storos. Carol knew Darren for 37 years. She tells me she had the good fortune to sit beside Darren in their first class in graduate school. Darren was the youngest in the program, Carol the oldest. Theirs became one of the most cherished and important friendships to Carol, and I know to Darren as well. He told me they would giggle like young girls in grad school. Carol says that she learned so much from Darren, but most in the last part of his life, when he became ill. She watched him grasp every moment. He showed his courage, his resolve, and his determination to wring every bit out of every day. And he taught her what and who is important. Carol didn't remind me of this, but I had heard it early and I remember this story. One time in the university days, they were having a heart-to-heart about Darren's life. Before he was ready to say it out loud himself, and when maybe Darren was going off on the wrong path, Carol said to him, "But Darren, you're gay." Every one of us needed a Carol in our lives at one point to tell us what is. That was before what Darren later explained to us was the year of discovery, where he set off on a one-year experiment to figure out whether he was gay. I think we all know the outcome from that. The results of the experiment were quite definitive. And I don't recall hearing of any control sample experiments involving women during the scientific period. Darren was quick to volunteer. He was generous with his time. His intelligence, his commitment usually led him to be running the show or partly running the show. And I understood it was partly through that volunteering trajectory that he came to know Mark and Scott. Mark, who you've seen already. They became so close. Meals almost weekly and many beautiful international holidays with them, such as the Norfolk Islands, south of France. And such good friends that they have actually taken possession of that famous purple chair, apparently for a permanent placement in their place in Saltcoats, Saskatchewan. However, even Darren accepted the possibility that the chair may have fallen out of the back of the truck on the way to Saskatchewan. Kyle Deems, Kyle, they originally lived in the same neighborhood where they were largely inseparable. Over time, Kyle and Darren became Kyle and Aaron, and those two eventually moved to Port Moody and became active members of the Pomo Homos. I was jealous of his laughter with Kyle. They giggled so quickly and freely when they were together. Kyle tells me that he learned his most successful pickup line from Darren. So to all you children present, take this one on and make it your own. Great jacket. Where did you get that? Simple but effective. When Kyle ran to become a member of Parliament, Darren volunteered to phone random numbers to try to convince constituents to vote for Kyle. In Kyle's words, who on earth would do that? Well, Darren would, of course. Darren was there for many important moments in Kyle's life. His Canadian citizenship, picking out his dog, also everyday times. Even there, when Kyle fled the hospital, doped up in a gown, when they almost performed the wrong surgery on him, and he ultimately did coax Kyle back and regain the trust of the doctor. Kevin Duffy? Kevin tells me about an event that completely captures the breadth of Darren's generosity. These two and friends went to Penticton for Kevin's birthday. Kevin was most excited about the chance to ride floaties down the channel from Penticton. The chosen day was cloudy and rainy. Darren decided not to go floating, but drove the rest of them to the rental place. When they arrived, the kids working there were closing up due to the wind. Darren persevered and begged the kids, "We came all the way from Vancouver for Kevin's birthday and to float the channel." No luck. Darren to the kids, "There must be some way we can float the channel." The kids, "You can go to the dollar store and get your own floaties." Kevin was losing motivation. Darren dragged them to the store. They bought floaties and a pump. I haven't verified this, but I'm guessing that Darren either paid for everything or offered to pay for everything. Drove them back to the channel. Darren waved them off as they set off down the channel and went to the hotel to rest. 2 hours later, he was waiting at the pickup place, delighted to have been able to make it possible despite these difficulties. Now the kicker is, the surprising part was that Darren was suffering from a concussion through all this from a recent bike crash. But to me, that just demonstrates Darren. He was there to achieve everything and contribute everything for his friends whenever he could. Kevin was so dear to Darren that for many years, he had the primetime slot of Sunday evenings that we learned was reserved only for Kevin. The rest of us had to pick up a Tuesday or worse. Another important person in Darren is Scott Willett. Scott's here with Dave. Scott was Darren's partner for many years, an important friend to Darren in the last years of his life, together with Dave. These two are now the parents to the beloved Puss Puss. Erasmo Jimenez, Erasmo became one of Darren's closest companions in the last few years. I know they were extremely important to each other and almost inseparable. Erasmo tells me of his trip with Darren to Winnipeg in the winter. Erasmo is from Mexico City, so Winnipeg in the winter is new and exciting. They went to a facility or a place called The Leaf, where in a warm setting you can see insects and butterflies. Erasmo said it was captivating, and one-winged butterflies in particular caught Darren's attention. These are Erasmo's words. His fascination, peppered with humor and a cheeky Chernobyl reference, added an extraordinary touch to the experience. After that, they went to a park covered in snow. Erasmo was excited. He wanted to recreate an iconic photo of his favorite singer lying in a bikini in the garden. His version was to be him in a Speedo laying in the snow. Erasmo's words again. Darren's reaction was a mix of surprise, wide-eyed curiosity, nervous laughter, and a hint of questioning Erasmo's sanity. However, he rose to it, and Erasmo's happiness was captured in one of the many photos that Erasmo says are all the best because Darren took them. My partner David and Darren had a close friend group with, David and I had a close friend group with Darren at the core, at the heart. It isn't a fixed list of people, and I'm particularly paranoid that I'm going to forget someone. So this is a list that includes these names. Everett, Michael, Jamie, Jerry, Steve, Gavin, Luke, Don, Glenn, Jurgen, Ed, Adam, Tom, Rob, Hank, Tom. If I have forgotten someone, please shoot me dead. I've been struggling to find the words. There we go. The words to honor what this group shared with Darren. And humbled to try. The most I can say is to describe them. They are all solid, intelligent, respectful, caring, madcap, crazy. Darren was the heart, and we were all better for it. For many years, a small group of us would rotate hosting the group for Sunday dinner at each of our homes. If you're paying attention, you might be wondering about Sundays with Kevin that I mentioned earlier, but this was pre-Kevin. My suggestion to you as a life hack is figure out a way that you can have Sunday dinner made for you by a friend for 5 weeks out of 6. It's a truly beautiful and generous experience. It takes away the dread of Sunday evenings with back to work Monday looming. When it was Darren's turn, we would arrive at his place. These days were mostly to his place on 16th Avenue, to find all the lights turned down to about 25% brightness. That tendency of Darren drove me crazy, but it was his thing. In the kitchen, you would find what one dear friend described, and who will remain anonymous. It looked like Darren had taken everything out of his kitchen cupboards for some unknown reason. Again, that's how he rolled. God love him. He would often be trying a new recipe. Dinner would be a far-off dream by the appointed dinner time. He would start defrosting food after we arrived. But the time together was fun, the wine flowed. Eventually dinner would come. One of my favorite recipes was his mother's, a dessert which was repeated several times, that had the descriptive and perhaps slightly naughty name, self-saucing. I thought self-saucing pudding was the true and only name for this delight. I recently asked him for the recipe, and he provided a page of his mother's recipes that were shared back in the day in the Dauphin, Manitoba Consumer paper. There, you might easily overlook what was named in a boring way, hot cocoa pudding. So maybe self-saucing was a bit too racy for the community and the church ladies to see in the paper. Darren personified fear of missing out, or FOMO, to me. A very brief story about that. David and I were extremely lucky enough to go on some spectacular vacations with Darren. On one, there was a group of us in Rio de Janeiro. The group was going to fly from there to Sao Paulo. Darren, David, and I decided to make it a journey, foregoing the plane ride with the others, to take a bus several hours down the coast to a beautiful seaside town called Parachi for a few days there, before carrying on again by bus to rejoin the group in Sao Paulo. My recollection is it was a Friday or a Saturday when we set out. The three of us arrived. We walked around Parachi for about half an hour. Darren says, "This is nice, but I'm going to Sao Paulo to join the gang in the clubs tonight." I think he got on the next bus. It would have taken probably 10 more hours to get to Sao Paulo. He arrived at 1 a.m., but he made it, and he didn't miss out. In my experience, Darren was always the smartest person in the room. And the information that Camille just shared with us about his work life really demonstrated that to me. I'm a lawyer. I attribute the fact of this story to the reality that I practice in a fairly limited area. But Darren very quickly gave up talking to me about the legal issues coming up in his job, because it left me in the dust, and he knew more about it than I did. Larry's comments mentioned his intelligence, and I had the same anecdote, the same experience. From the fall, Everett and Larry both each told me this story. They were trying to make a schedule of all of his medications that he was taking. His ability to manage that was fading. He became extremely frustrated when they couldn't parse out the list, and they each said to him, "Darren, what's a TID? What's a bid?" in reference to the Latin abbreviations that he had, well, within his wheelhouse. I told you about that yard party that Darren invited us to the first week we met him, and many parties at Darren's over the years. God, we had fun. Some of the big ones had their own names. Smarty Pants names as only Darren could dream up. The 5th anniversary of his life as a gay man was called Babylon 5. His place on 16th was in the 500 block of West 16th Avenue, so not far into the Tony West Side. So the pride parties he hosted there were called Barely West Side Pride. So many were there in attendance that the fence had to be taken down in some parts so the crowd could spill out into the lane. Many here will have been at Cancerversary after 1 year, and one too, as Mark mentioned earlier. This is not the end of the story. That I imagined, but life happens when you're making other plans. I, like Mark, saw a lot of similarities in my life with Darren's. I was about 2 months older. from a small town near Saskatchewan. Me from the urbane and cosmopolitan eastern central Alberta, and Darren from western Manitoba. We were from small families, each with older sisters, mothers who taught at elementary school, some time at the University of Alberta, each making a pilgrimage to the life we were aiming for in Vancouver at a time we were scared to say why. Each of us had a plucky red car, me a Micra, him a Tercel. I imagined we would be together until the ripe old age. I had the opportunity to spend a few quiet minutes with Darren the last week he lived. It's a precious moment and memory I'll think of forever. It was what came to be the second last day he spent in his home before his final move to St. John's Hospice. His body was tuckered out by then, the poor guy. It was the middle of the afternoon. He decided to go to bed and rest. There were a few of us spending time with him that afternoon. He went to the bedroom. Then a few minutes later, he called me to come sit with him. He was sitting on the side of the bed, trying to gather enough energy or momentum or fortitude in the face of pain to swing his poor swollen legs up onto the bed and carry out the painful motion of sliding into the middle of the bed. That was a big chore, and it took a while. We sat there. We spoke some, but mostly we just sat together quietly. There was some November sunshine. We could glimpse his flowers in the yard. It was beautiful. Just being with Darren. You could live two lives and not find a person as decent and generous as Darren. Please take some of his life hacks to heart. Make a will, make a power of attorney, make a representative agreement. Do it now before you need it. Love your friends. And don't forget, great jacket. Where did you get that? I'm going to hijack the program. I'm not sure if it's something Darren thought of, but to me it's a celebration. Please clap for your friend, Darren Kopetsky.
Well, obviously, Darren has moved all of us. We wish him peace. I ask you to give thanks for Darren, who is so near and dear to you and who has now been taken from you. I ask you to remember the love that Darren offered and received while he was with you here on earth. I hope that nothing good in this man's life will be lost, but will be of benefit to the world, and it sounds like through his work it will. That all that was important to him will be respected by those who follow, and that everything in which he was great will continue to mean much to you now that he's gone. I hope that you who were close to him may now, because of his death, be even closer to each other, and that you may, in peace and friendship here on earth, always be deeply conscious of his legacy to you. You can close your eyes and pray that he will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that he has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see him, or your heart can be full of the love that you've shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can embrace tomorrow because of yesterday. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back, or you can do it Darren would want. Smile, open your eyes, love, and go on. Rest eternal grant unto Darren, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May his soul and the souls of all the departed members of his friends and family rest in peace. Thank you all very much. The reception follows right now. We need to move the chairs out of the way, so if you can be of any assistance in that process, that would be wonderful. For those of us who need a cane, I'm just going to go to the back. Thank you all very much.